I think what used to bother me about corporate sponsorship of Pride Month was how easily they erased the struggle. The rainbow merch, the slogans, the shallow solidarity, it all felt hollow, performative, unsubstantial. In the US, this has become even more obvious lately. Companies pulling away from Pride, canceling campaigns, walking back support when it no longer feels convenient. But for many of us, Pride has never been about convenience. I remember the fear in my mother's eyes when I came out, worried the world would chew me up and the violence I could experience. Terrified I'd die of AIDS like so many of the men that she cared for as a nurse. I remember a guy from my school, 2 years ahead of me, who got bashed outside of a bar just for being gay. I remember when I first started being a teacher, keeping my identity quiet at work, afraid that people would see me as weak or dangerous. And still, I know that I didn't live through the worst of it. I was born after the Lavender Scare, long after McCarthy's blacklist of queer lives. I was still learning to speak when more than 100,000 men, gay men, died of AIDS, many in isolation, abandoned in sterile hospital rooms while their government and families looked away. But I was alive to watch the aftermath of the murder of Matthew Shepard. So yes, I celebrate Pride, but I also question it. What does it mean to celebrate if we forget the cost? Pride is necessary, but it isn't always comfortable. The week leading into Pride here in Guadalajara, it rained. Torrents, hard, every night. It felt like the city was washing away the dust of denial, cooling the heat for something sacred, something real. As the skies cleared and the sun broke through, color returned to the streets. Rainbow flags unfurled from buildings. Tacos gay prepped for a celebration. Even the mushroom cafe I love dressed one of its mushrooms in full rainbow flair. But I wanted more than glitter and gear. I wanted roots. So I went to CODISE Memorial Museum, a space dedicated to LGBTQIA+ history here in Jalisco. CODISE, or the Cohesion de Diversidades para la Substantibilidad, is a civil organization committed to human rights, particularly for people in the LGBTQ community. For over 20 years, they've fought for inclusion, health services, and dignity. This museum isn't about selling Pride. It's about remembering why it exists. Inside, I stood in front of a wall with the beginning of 550 words in Spanish. Insults, slurs, names that have been hurled in publications at queer people. Not words of kindness, not words to be forgotten. There were articles from the 1930s and 40s exposing how the government published names, 2,000 in 4 years, outing people to their neighbors. There were news clippings of queer people murdered in cold blood. And yet, alongside the pain, there's art. There were books dedicated to a variety of LGBTQ+ themes, histories, stigmas, and writing. The first gay cartoon in Mexico, a drawing of Popeye and Brutus from 1939. It's funny, crude, weird, and it reminded me how long we've been telling our stories, even when no one wanted to hear them. But what stopped me in my tracks was the exhibit on gay marriage. It's easy to forget how recent this fight was, and hard to imagine the world that I know, where I'm treated like an equal, wasn't possible even 15 years ago. Until 2010, marriage was only symbolic for gays in Mexico. This didn't stop the media from portraying the horrors of the homosexuals getting married and how this would destroy all of society. But that year, Jaime Corbian Zamora, with his husband and 32 other brave couples from around Mexico, traveled to Mexico City to be the first in the country to marry, because it was finally legal there, but still not here. Jaime didn't stop at a wedding. He joined the fight with the group GOL, Grupo de Orgullo y Liberación. He lobbied and marched year after year. In 2010, the local government in Guadalajara, using public money, worked with the church to launch conversion therapy programs. They demonized us, gathered thousands of signatures to stop equality under the reasoning that equal marriage would destroy society. GOL didn't stop. Year after year, they marched, protested, dressed as bishops to mock the hypocrisy. In 2013, they submitted 27,719 signatures in favor of equal marriage. The church, just 4,000. The tide had finally turned. Finally, officials had no choice but to act. They could no longer say, "We can't." They had to say, "We will." I left the museum in awe. These flags outside shops, they didn't hang themselves. They were earned. The next day, I dressed in my own pride gear, ready to join the celebration. At Miguel's house, we gathered. Louise had printed out the history of Pride in Guadalajara and taped it to the wall. We ate, laughed, drank, and stood tall in our queerness before heading out to join the parade. I met my friend Antonio at his tienda, Mercado Prado, right on Avenida Vallarta. The sky again grew dark as clouds loomed overhead. Umbrellas popped open, rainbows on rainbows. And then the storm hit, hard. But the queers were here, and they weren't gonna go anywhere. People from all walks of life filled the streets. A little rain wasn't going to silence us. It was a parade for everyone to be proud of. It stretched from one side of the city down the avenue and continued down the other. Asexuals called out. Flags of various colors and types waved through the weather. Asexual, trans, lesbian, bisexual, non-binary, gay. One sign read, "Being LGBTQ isn't a choice, but being homophobic is." Trucks passed full of dancers, shirtless men, bears, queens, and Mexican cowboys. Beautiful Madonnas and men in rainbow harnesses, leather, lace, glitter, and joy. Even a double-decker bus from CODISE rolled by, blasting music and beaming. The streets were packed with bodies. People stood in bars, cheering from balconies, waving from windows, cheering us on. At Arcos Vallarta, the streets overflowed. The rain didn't stop the music, or the dancing, or the celebration. Finally, we had come full circle, under the statue of Minerva, the goddess of war, wisdom, and justice. Fitting, really, as our pride is all of those things. It was pouring. It was packed. It was perfect. Costumes shimmered. Flags flew high, and strangers hugged like lifelong friends. In other parts of the city, the party kept going. Block parties took over neighborhoods. Clubs lined with revelers. The spirit of pride refusing to go quietly. By morning, the streets were calm again, but something had changed. I'm proud of every hardship I've endured for being queer. Proud of those who came before me, those who fought and refused to be erased. I'm proud of every protest, every conversation, every march, every kiss that refused to hide. I'm proud of Guadalajara for remembering its past, for fighting through its present. Pride isn't a product, it's resistance, it's survival, it's joy. So thank you, Guadalajara, for your rain, for your rage, for your rainbows, for letting me, a queer immigrant, call you home. This is Pato's Path, a story of celebration and resistance, of rain-soaked joy and radical remembrance, a journey through queerness, culture, and courage. If this story resonated with you, hit like, tap subscribe, and follow along to keep walking this journey together.